Hello and welcome back. We are here to finish off George Orwell's 1984. I know, you would love to just keep on doing this book for however long it takes, and we certainly could. Like I've said at the beginning of this series, there are people who make their careers out of 1984 and George Orwell. That is what they do. That's not really what I want to do with this YouTube channel. I'm looking more for breadth rather than depth necessarily. That's not such a bad thing, really, is it? So that means that we kind of have to come to a conclusion on this book, at least for now. And if we're being honest, I have already tried to record this video about 4 times. A couple times is because a cat messed it up. But nevertheless, it is hard to shut this down. It is hard to come to a conclusion about this book because there is so much about it. So I'll just kind of give myself a couple of guiding questions to talk about in terms of how to close this all out. One of them is, the first guiding question is, why do I like this book? Which is always a good question. I think that you should ask anytime you finish a book that you like. You should be able to explain to yourself, if not to anybody else, or perhaps to your audience of millions, why you like the book. So why did I like 1984? I like 1984 partially because I do have a soft spot in my heart for dystopia stories, but also because I think Orwell is very good at creating a world, however improbable the world may seem to us. He is also very good at creating a story that is very, very convincing until you kind of look under the hood, right? Because when we're reading all of this about the party and Big Brother and all Goldstein and O'Brien and all them, it all sounds very plausible, but there are hints throughout the book that none of it may be true. You could, because all of the information we get is from Winston. All of the information Winston gets is from the party, and the party could not care less about such a thing as objective reality. So there is a very good chance that none of the stuff that we know about the party, its history, the world that it exists in, why there's a war, why things are the way they are, there's a very good chance none of that is true. Except for Baby O'Brien saying, the goal of power is power. I kind of buy that. But nevertheless, we don't know that anything is true. We can't know that anything is true. And so we are left as readers. Orwell leaves us to kind of decide what level we want to land on. That is everything that we read. Do we want everything that we read in the book to be the literal truth as described? Do we want some things to maybe not be quite right? Like maybe Julia was an agent of the thought police all along, the whole time. And she arranged to help with the downfall of Winston Smith. And even at the very end of the book where they have their final meeting and he notes that she's got a scar and she says, I betrayed you. Maybe that was her sort of checking up on him to see if he was still doing okay. Maybe. She might be, she might not be. There is no evidence in the book to tell us either way. So I think that's one of the things that I do really like about the book is that it is kind of maddening. And when you start to go down that rabbit hole of nothing is true, it makes you think a lot about the book a lot more. And then, of course, we do what Orwell probably would want us to do, which is to then apply that to the world in which we live, where we ask ourselves, where does our information come from? Where does our knowledge of the world come from? There's the knowledge that comes from our experience that we can be reasonably sure is real. I know we're treading in philosophical waters here, but we can be reasonably sure that our everyday lived experience of the world is real. We can be reasonably sure that there is a reality that we all experience. But we can also be reasonably sure that there are people in power who are trying to tell us what the world should be. There are people with a vested interest in staying powerful who try to convince us of who our enemies are and who our friends are and what our values should be and what we should buy and what we should not buy and who we should support and who we shouldn't support. And it could be very, very easy for us to kind of just go along to get along because that's a lot of work sorting through all that stuff. So yeah, it is well written. It's fun to read despite its bleakness, and it is extremely applicable to the world. I don't think Orwell intended it as prophecy, despite what 10-year-old me thought. I've seen several essays saying that Orwell intended this to be a warning, right? That maybe this literal scenario, the literal Oceania, is not something that's going to happen, but something like it could. Remember, he's writing in the 40s. He's writing just after World War II, and he has seen major totalitarian governments rise and occasionally fall. And I think by looking at that and getting involved with that, Orwell thought, wow, how easy would it be for a British totalitarian government to arise, or an American totalitarian government to arise, or anywhere else? The answer, of course, is frighteningly easy. So that is Orwell's warning to us, is that to watch out for this. I noted that as I read that he's providing us with this scenario. He's giving us this kind of worst case scenario for how things could go. But Orwell doesn't really give us solutions to that. He doesn't say, okay, here's Oceania. It's terrible. Now here's how you stop it. Here's how you prevent this from ever happening. He doesn't do that. He just says, here's Oceania. It's terrible. Good luck. Which I think is another reason why this book gets taught a lot. And this gets into my second sort of guiding question is, well, what do we learn from this book? And the reason why this book gets put in high school classes so much is because of that. Because a lot of students, especially, teenagers tend to be, in a lot of ways, very idealistic. Teenagers tend to have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for things, right? Kids, when you get to be, my venerable age of... you will find that a lot of that energy for, let's change the world, kind of gets siphoned into other things. But young people are very energetic and they want to change the world. And why shouldn't they? Of course they should. They're going to be the ones occupying the world next. So of course they need to make a world that is better for them. And this book kind of says, here's what's not to do. And hopefully if a student reads the book and they can then spot what's going on in the world, they can spot things and say, okay, that person is basically doing doublethink. That person is trying to manipulate the language that I use. That person is claiming to understand a reality that isn't true. Then they can counter that. And so, it's not really a guidebook for us. It is, however, a worst case scenario for us. And I think that teachers who put this in their curriculum are kind of hoping that the students will pick up on that. I mean, in my experience, sometimes you do have to kind of take their heads and sort of turn them and say, that way, look that way. But I think we all hope that our students will pick up on that and that this will stick with them. That they will, as they travel through life, they will see things and think, that reminds me of 1984, and I don't like it. So, of course, some people don't pick up on that. I mean, people who haven't read 1984 often have a very poor understanding of what 1984 is. Again, look at 10-year-old me, who thought it was literally about the end of the world. But hey, that's all the more reason to talk about it and to teach it and make sure it gets spread. And of course, it's interesting that the book tends to get banned or not necessarily banned, but at least put on these lists in American high schools where people want it taken out. And ostensibly, it is because there's a sex scene. There is a sex scene between Winston and Julia. And some parents allegedly don't like that. But I also think that there's also some people who really don't want kids to be presented with, this idea that if you always follow the rules and you always do what you're told, the possible end point of that is this horrifying dystopia. Because a lot of parents want their kids to follow the rules and do what they're told. So where do we go from here? Having read 1984, having thought well about it, having thought about what Orwell has put in front of us, what do we do with this knowledge? Like I said, all we can do really is watch. All we can do is pay attention to our world and try to, every time we see something that starts to fit into the mold of what we see Orwell presenting here, we do something to try to stop it. Vote, protest, be active, go out on marches, run for office if that's something that you're interested in doing, become a legislator, a politician yourself. Try to do something to maximize whatever the opposite of Oceania is. That, this sort of freedom of thought, this freedom of opinion, this ability to express your beliefs and your ideas without the thought police coming in and crashing down on you. That's why do I like the book. That's what do we learn from the book. I'm going to be coming back to this book well often. I think in my current cohort, we're not doing this book, but I think the next cohort, I'll probably loop 1984 back into rotation again, because it has been a while since I taught the book, and I do really enjoy it. And every time I do, I get some good insights from students about it. And we try to imagine sort of what it is about our life now in the 2020s that maybe Orwell if Orwell knew about some of the stuff that we do now and the way that we live now, is there anything that he would change about the book? And I think I mentioned at the very beginning of this series the idea of social media. That we put ourselves out there in the world for everybody to see, where Winston Smith might have been terrified that someone's watching him all the time. In our world, it's almost an honor that someone is watching us all the time. We want more subscribers, right? We want more subscribers, we want more followers, we want more people seeing what we do when we do it. And that is something that is coveted, and I think Orwell would have found that weird. But what I think is also interesting is that structure of putting ourselves out there in the world kind of makes it so much harder for something like the party to exist. Because remember, in order for the party to do what it does, it has to have a centralized stranglehold on information that only it can control. And that's really, really hard when information is decentralized in the way that the internet is, in the way that social media is. That said, if more and more people keep, if fewer and fewer companies are in control of social media, like the Meta Group and Elon Musk, and there's got to be somebody else, then that starts to become a problem. But I feel like we're okay in that regard. I don't think we're heading towards that particular cliff. Other cliffs, absolutely, but not that particular cliff. So I want to thank you for sticking around with me for 1984. I really do appreciate it. Maybe we'll read it again sometime. If I have any other epiphanies or opinions, I'll do another video. Because why not? Because I can. This is free-ish, kind of, sort of. But yeah, thanks for sticking around. I hope you appreciate it. If you did, again, please subscribe for more of this stuff. The button's right down there. You know where it is. And I will see you all for the next book, whatever that turns out to be. I haven't quite decided yet. All right. Have a good one.